Hello, this is Poland Envirothon Team A. My name is Leah Basil.
I'm Ella Schmid.
I'm Peter Burritt.
I'm Ethan Broderick.
I'm Sarah Warner.
And we're going to talk about rangelands and managing that today. What is a rangeland? A rangeland is more like an open country field. It's not really paved, not like densely wooded forestry. That's kind of not that concept. It's just kind of like the more deserted grasslands. So here are some types that are present in Idaho. I'm sorry. All right. First, we have the Pacific bunchgrass, as it's self-explanatory. It's mostly just like bunches of grasses, and there's different types of species of it, but that's just as a whole. There's coniferous forest, but this is not a rangeland. This is what is present in Idaho, so I thought it was important to include. But this is more northern Idaho, not toward the southern part. There's also sagebrush grasslands, which is the majority of the biomes, I guess you could say, in Idaho. It's 18.5 million acres around. Then there's also your salt desert shrublands, which is kind of like your deserty, dry, hot concepts. And then the juniper woodlands, which is your trees and that side of it. But it's important to keep these like upkept and maintained because it can be economically beneficial because rangelands are often used for recreational activities like biking, hunting, and all of those kind of things. So by keeping them upkept, people can make profit off of it, and people can work with that, and so keeping them managed is very important.
For livestock as a management tool of the rangelands, preserving the ecological balance is very important to create a thriving piece of land. So many people believe that the ecological state will improve if you remove all the livestock or most of them. But that is only occurring when the farmers let the cattle overgraze. So if you take careful consideration and use different grazing systems, the ecological state will increase. So for the year-long system, the cattle graze for the entire year continuously, and it is not high maintenance. The cows can choose from whatever vegetation they choose, and they increase in performance. But this can lead to degradation of the soil, and the plants may not grow as well next year. The next grazing system would be the seasonal one, where it's for about half the year and in a temperate and colder climate, where the cows, they follow the green. So in the summer and the spring, they increase in elevation, and then to follow the green back down in the fall and the winter, they decrease in elevation. The third system is the deferred grazing, where farmers will wait until the plants set seed and they rotate this yearly to increase the quality of the soil. So it's not as, the plants aren't as sensitive to the grazing. But the animals may not have a large pick of what they eat and may decrease performance. Then the final one is the rest grazing, where for 1 year, one field would be fallow and the other two would be grazed on and planted, which could increase the animal performance, but the nutrients maybe of the plants may be less palatable to them. So for the best grazing system, it would be a combination of all four of these to provide the soil quality increases and the land doesn't get depleted.
For my part, I'm talking about how wildfires and grazing can help improve ecosystems. I'll start off with how a key part in preventing wildfires today are prescribed controlled burns. If you don't know already, controlled burns, also known as hazard reduction burning, is a process where either farmers or wildland firefighters reduce the fine fuel load present in a field by burning it off. What this does is it reduces the amount of flammable fuels that create dangerously large wildfires. Controlled burns not only reduce the fine fuel load that poses risks to private property, but it also improves the ecosystem as well. If you periodically burn off the grasses and weeds, many of which are dead, it allows for new growth and development of other plants that improve the health of soil and prevent the growth of undesirable weeds such as rose bushes and trees as well. A safer method to improving these ecosystems while achieving the same result is by using livestock to graze the fields and pastures, effectively doing the same job that the fire would be doing, but in a safer way. This would be the more ideal method for Idaho, where much of the land is located west of the Rockies in the Great Basin, an area where it would be very dry, and if a fire gets out of control, it could become very dangerous to the surrounding area. This is why grazing would most likely be a more practical way of improving ecosystems and preventing wildfires in Idaho.
I did noxious weed control, and a good way to control it is to have animals grazing, and to try to prevent displacing it or putting it in the wrong area. A few examples of noxious weeds are the Japanese knotweed, orange hawkeye, and the Canada thistle. These weeds are quite invasive, and they are placed there. They're coming to Idaho in the ecosystem. They also harm the ecosystem, and they're misplaced by ignorance, misplacement, or accident. One pro of noxious weed control is that it can put down the weeds and you don't really have to worry about them. And then one con is that noxious weed control, if overgrazing is too much and it gets too dry, like there's no roots and there's another drought, then it could be a dust bowl. And a common problem, especially for farmers, are thistles and nettles. A bull thistle is a weed that is incredibly common and produces by seeds, and so the good way to stop it is to leave a cut bull thistle stem alone. And you got to be careful with hay you got to be careful with buying non-weed hay because contaminated hay could cause them to come back, and you have to be knowledgeable about new plants in the area. And the manual way to control the bull thistle is to use a shovel and dig up a few inches in the ground to dig up a few inches of the roots so that they can't grow back. And noxious weeds are very difficult to control because they're such a large problem. Some popular methods of controlling them are biological control through use of insects, fungi, and bacteria, grazing management either by prescribed burns or livestock, mechanical techniques such as tilling and bulldozing, and chemical control through the use of herbicides.
So I had wildlife management. So recently the sage-grouse population in Idaho has been decreasing. The sage-grouse are very important to the western landscape that supports hundreds of fish and wildlife species. The sage-grouse depend on sagebrush as a food source throughout the whole year, especially in the winter months when there is no other food source other than the sagebrush. Rangeland managers have been trying to increase the sage-grouse population by fencing livestock out of their leks, but statistics are showing that the sage-grouse actually prefer areas where livestock graze. Another factor to consider is that the mule deer population also lives in the same ecosystems as the sage-grouse with the sagebrush during the winter months. A new study shows that the sage-grouse conservation can also protect the critical habitat for mule deer. In order for the sage-grouse population to increase, they need to live in an area where livestock graze, along with them needing sagebrush as a sufficient food source. Also, mule deer and livestock should be allowed to live in the same area with the sage-grouse because they do not negatively affect each other, but instead the sage-grouse conservation efforts have recently been increasing the protection of the deer migration habitat during the winter months. Many of the negative effects during the winter for mule deer are actually caused by lack of tree cover rather than a contact with cattle, which means that mule deer and livestock can live in harmony together in the same area. Although, on the other hand, one of the problems that it creates is that over a long period of time, the vegetation in these areas where the sage-grouse, mule deer, and cattle are living together will cause vegetation amounts to decrease because all of these species will be feeding in the same area. Overall, the sage-grouse population will increase if the livestock are grazing in the same area because they prefer to be in the same area as the livestock, and the mule deer will not be affected by the introduction of livestock in their winter gardens.
Thank you.